Hello, everyone. I'm Judge Penny Wolfgang, in for Phil Arno. Welcome to The Big Picture. In early March, I conducted the first prime-time interview in Buffalo, right here on WBBZ-TV, when news of coronavirus cases started rising in New York and across the country after devastating parts of China and Italy. Soon after, most of us went into quarantine, following daily briefings from the president, the governor, and our county executive and local health officials on what to do as cases of COVID-19 rose, along with the death rate. Now, here we are in late July, and by all indications, we seem to have flattened the curve here in Western New York. Cases appear to be down, things are opening up as we follow strict social distancing and mask-wearing guidelines. But in other parts of the country, cases of coronavirus are now at alarming rates. California has surpassed New York in people testing positive overall. Hospitals in Florida and the Southwest are at their max. So, are we just lucky? Our guest for the next half hour says we must remain vigilant. Dr. Raul Vazquez is a prominent physician in Buffalo, president and CEO of the Greater Buffalo United Accountable Care Organization, G Health Enterprises, and Urban Family Practice, and is a leader in both Hispanic and minority community and Western New York overall. He fought for more testing. He's been a voice of knowledge and guidance. He should know, because Dr. V and members of his family also dealt with COVID-19 firsthand back in March and April. We welcome him back to The Big Picture, joining us through Zoom from his practice. Hello again, Dr. V. You know, some say we're lucky that cases are going down in New York, but information that you sent us just recently shows an increase in coronavirus in certain zip codes in the city. And with the minority population that you serve, do you know why this is?
Well, I think what's happening is, initially we weren't testing people enough. Then we started to kind of test at an appropriate rate. What I mean is you were getting results within 24 to 48 hours, especially on the COVID side, the nasal, which tell you that people have infections. But now, because there's such a delay, at least on patients in the community, they still have supplies for healthcare workers. But when you're dealing with the community, especially areas that were hot, like Kaleida itself is not doing any more community-based testing. And everything's been switched to Quest, and Quest is overwhelmed with what's going on around the country. So they're backlogged to 14 days. I mean, to do a test and wait 14 days, contact tracing's out the door, and you're going to have difficult times getting the right data. And you may think that the numbers are looking good and then get a bunch of positives and almost, move you away from getting a better assessment of how to really manage the community with these issues.
Now, do you know why, or have more information as to why the virus is likely to be picked up more from the Black and Hispanic communities than in other areas of the community?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to be as a result of lack of primary care services. I mean, you have a population that has chronic diseases like hypertension, like asthma, like diabetes, that when those things are managed, your vulnerability for the virus is higher. And the mechanisms by which those diseases affect the people, the patients, they also they make them vulnerable to the virus, so that almost like you have receptors where this virus can come into. If you're a hypertensive that's not controlled, you have more of those receptors. If you smoke, you have more of those receptors. So that's one thing. Two is a lot of these individuals are also essential workers. So they're out in the field bringing this thing back home. Three is often the multi-generations that are living within the same household. And that's often a problem because if one gets it, it's such a confined space that everyone's going to get it. On the east side, the Burmese population tends to have a really high percentage of positives, even now. So it's important to keep track of that, because you can do a good job on the rest of the county. But if you don't really target these areas, you're going to expose everybody to sort of an inoculation from people that are still infected or maybe carriers.
Right. Now, you were a champion of testing, and you were one of the first facilities to conduct testing. And statistics you shared with us recently show that 5% of those tested at your urban family practice tested positive. So one of the questions is, how often should a person be tested? And what's the test like? Because we keep hearing there are different kinds of tests and newer kinds also.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we've done is really test the population around the zip codes, and a lot of the patients that we follow also were big in this area. So we have about 8,000 patients within our primary care network. And then we also have a health phone. So there's about another 8,000 lives there. So among the 16,000 lives, we have about a 5% positive rate. I think the important thing is, because we're doing a fairly good job with primary care, we find that we had one death in all our groups. One's too many, but because of the proper kind of alignments, even with the 5% of people that got this, we were thinking about not only just, following this disease, but figuring out the pathophysiology, what creates these problems. What we found also with that population was, since we have hypertensive patients that we were treating with a type of blood pressure medication called ACEs and ARBs, which most of us use now, that in a way was protective. And the data is showing that it is showing that. Asthmatic patients, which we thought would have a problem with asthma, having more of these receptor sites, we were treating them with inhaled steroids. We were treating them with prednisone. We were treating them with dexamethasone when they were getting worse, and the COPD. And now these are considered treatments for people that get infected with coronavirus. So if you had good primary care, that was really a good thing to kind of help you through this whole process. So that's one thing. Now, the different testing that are out there, for one, you have the COVID-19 test, which is the nasal one. Now, that one gets stored in a medium and gets sent out to a lab that runs the test. Now, when you put it in a medium, you're putting this virus. You don't want to wait too long, because it may not stay alive long enough to be tested. So if you're putting this and testing it 14 days out, you're going to have a problem with the results. And the test that we run now is, if you got 100 people that do have the virus, only 70 of those people are going to come back positive with the test. So you've got a small window to kind of make this work. The other test that we often do, it's what's called an antibody test, and that's a blood test. So that's telling us, if you had this virus in the past, about 10 to 14 days later, you're going to produce an antibody, which is called an IgG, towards that particular virus. And then you'll know. So if you tested positive, now we retest you 2 weeks later, you test negative, and that antibody kicked in, the likelihood is that you're going to be protected. The studies are still looking at that, but they're testing those antibodies against viruses to see if you have a protection. But since we've had the MERS and we've had the SARS, which are similar coronaviruses in the past, and that's been the case, that those antibodies last for 6 months to 2 years, we're almost thinking that that's the same thing that's happening now with regards to the antibody testing that we're doing for the coronavirus. So those are the only two tests right now.
You sent us some information about a device that Abbott Labs is going to come out with soon that seems like it might be an instant test. Can we look forward to that,
Yes.
soon?
Yeah, so we have a mobile unit that we have ordered, and it's coming in at the end of July. So if we do get that third wave in September, which I believe is coming, we have to go back to the telehealth and things like that. These units can go out and test people. Now, those are the units that, if we're going to open up schools and do anything else, are really essential. So there's 3 companies coming out now with that particular unit, and you'll know the results within 10 to 15 minutes. So you can actually do the nasal test, put this thing in the system, and within 15 minutes, tell the individual you're positive or you're negative. And that makes things so much easier to, not only with personnel that you have to staff in order to really do the work, so you know who to send back to work and who not. Because right now, the only thing we're doing is temperatures. And temperatures, based on the population, you have about 80 to 85% of people that, that are temperature based when they present with these symptoms, because it hits the lungs. But that 20% that hits the nasal areas, those patients are coming in more with loss of taste and loss of smell, which is going to be completely different. So at least testing them with these types of devices you're going to be able to get a better approach of both of these individuals.
That would be really encouraging. Now, you and your practice were highlighted for your community response plan in a recent Business First publication and have been very active in the community with food, mask, and sanitizer drives in the city. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been doing a lot of the testing internally since we manage a lot of these individuals, and we have what are called navigators. We have about 90 navigators. Each of these navigators handles about 80 to 100 people that we manage. They've been used more as contact tracers. So because they know the community, they know the individuals, they know who lives in the house, and we have the data infrastructure to really capture this. So we become pretty valuable in these types of settings. So if someone comes back positive, we can tell them exactly what they need to do, right? And at the same time, we can monitor them through the process, figure out who's going to get tested. But most important, we're keeping these individuals in these homes for 14 days. And so through our app connections, we can find out from social determinants of health who needs food, who needs other things. And our teams are being redeployed to really get food out to these individuals and partnering with the school systems, because now they have school lunches, and our teams are helping figure out which of the members have school-age kids and getting some of those meals out to them. I mean, within the last 2 weeks, we've actually pushed out close to 300 meals just out to some of these communities. So it's been a good thing.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. I'm afraid to ask you this, but what is your reaction when you see people here or in other parts of the country gathering together, some reportedly having COVID parties to actually put themselves at risk? What can you say about that?
Well, remember during the Spanish flu, the third wave that came back was not a U-shape. And when I mean U-shape, in the beginning, the first two waves, the young people and old people are the ones that get affected. During the third wave, it had a middle wave between the ages of 20 and 40 were the ones that had more of the mortality attached to it. So it's coming back in September. It mutated similar to what we know the Spanish flu did. But at the same time, that's the group that's going to be more affected by this. So, yeah, we also found out that some of the ones that won the COVID challenge also ended up dying. So, I think people don't understand the importance, and they're young. Wisdom and age teaches us a lot of things, and unfortunately, some of them are not going to have the time to do that.
Well, you would know better than anybody because you and your family did go through COVID, and in early in the COVID pandemic. Could you remind us a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, no, it was really crazy. I mean, my daughter having fevers and then taking her to an urgent care and developing a pneumonia and getting tested. At the time, I didn't think she would have that. I thought she just had maybe a community acquired pneumonia. But looking at the pattern, not understanding what was going on, and then going through the whole trajectory of, her getting worse, not getting better, temperatures were so high, sending her to the suburban ER at the time, getting her admitted for pneumonia, treating her for pneumonia. She, learned a lot about the pathophysiology, but not until 13 days later from the testing, getting a result to what we are doing right now. And the good thing was that we did do the isolation. We did do everything we had to do in the home, like suspecting that she was positive, and no one really, no one in the family got it, which was very good. In addition to me and my younger daughter both have hypertension, so we were on ACEs and ARBs. Whether that had a protective mechanism, we don't know. But at least I can tell you that she got out of it. And once she got out of it, there were a lot of things from the virus that we learned. So once she had it after 2 weeks to 3 weeks, I ordered blood tests on her that checked on inflammatory markers of the body to see what kind of inflammation was going on with the different organs. And she still had some inflammation, what we called C-reactive protein, within her system. She had symptoms 4 weeks later, what they call post-COVID skin disorder, which is their skin and the legs got a little cyanotic. They turn a little purple. And what all this stuff was doing is all this inflammation was triggering off clotting in different parts of the body. Not in her case, but other people you've heard suffered heart attacks, strokes, kidney failure, pulmonary embolisms. All that stuff was actually triggered when this virus came into the lungs. So we learned a lot about the pathophysiology. The good thing is her C-reactive protein came down, and she's pretty much residual free right now at this time. her antibodies did turn positive.
Well, we are so happy to hear the good news that you and your family have recovered it, and it was a tough way to learn these lessons. But when we come back, we will continue our conversation with Dr. Raul Vazquez. Important information that could save your life is next, so please stay with us.